Welcome to the egcfpodcast, where we have in-depth conversations about topics that we may not cover on Sunday morning. My name is Nate, and today I'm joined by Rob Woodrum, Janelle Green, Matt Green, Blake Roseman, and again we are joined by Luana. In this episode, we talk about mental health. Hi, my name is Nate. I am the student pastor here at Eastgate.
My name is Rob. I'm one of the pastors here at Eastgate.
I'm Janelle. I'm also one of the pastors here at Eastgate.
My name is Matt. I'm the worship leader here at Eastgate.
I'm Blake. I'm the community pastor here at Eastgate.
I am Luana. I am on the board at Eastgate, and I have a business called Wonderful You, which is life coaching for women.
All right, so growing up in the church, my experience with mental health was it wasn't really talked about. And when it was ever brought up, the solution was just give it to God. And it never really went beyond that. What does the Bible say about mental health?
Just give it to God. I think we're done here.
Maybe you didn't actually give it to God. Maybe that's the problem, Nate.
No, and we don't want to make fun of giving things to God. We're not saying that. But we're talking about we're laughing at pat answers and quick answers that
Yes.
get thrown around a lot.
I know we're not even fully into the topic yet, but I have something to say to that specifically. Is when we say, I think the problem is not the giving it to God; it's that we haven't given people the tools to know what that is.
What is that?
When we say give it to God, what are we saying?
Right.
I think what people hear is, okay, push it deep down, give it to God.
Go eat something.
Go eat something. Just calm down. Give it to God and move on. Why are you worried? Stop worrying.
Right. It's actually kind of a, I don't know if this is the appropriate or right way to use this, but it's almost victim blaming. It's like, this is your problem. You shouldn't have this problem anyway, because if you were a good Christian, these things wouldn't happen.
Definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah, it actually digs deeper than that in a sense of there's almost an accusatory semblance of you don't have enough faith, or
so,
your faith isn't strong
yeah.
enough to keep your mind well or something.
So here's the thing. So the question that always pops into my mind is, how did we get here? Like, how did it end up being?
Well, a man and a woman love each other.
No.
No, but I like what you're going with this.
Here's what I will say: attitudes are changing on the spectrum of Christian influence and participation. The attitudes are rapidly changing, and so what we're addressing really isn't as prevalent as it once was. If you grew up in the 80s and 90s and were a Christian, you had a time. So, but this is. There's a history to this. Like, I kept thinking, like, how did we get here to where, if somebody says, well, I went to, this is just the reality of it. Back in the 90s, 80s, if you were a Christian in an evangelical church and you said, well, I'm going to see a therapist, it would have been immediate, like, shock. Like, whoa, what? Was that your experience? Did you have?
I don't remember anybody talking about
Well, yeah,
therapy.
never bring it up.
I never heard of the word trauma. Never heard anything like that.
And that's true. But if you did, and if you said, well, I'm going to go see a therapist, it would be like,
You might as well say that you're seeing a witch doctor.
that's right. What are you doing? How dare you say? And I heard multiple sermons over time, like people run off to the psychologist or they run off to the psychiatrist, and they don't ever trust the Lord or turn their lives over, blah, blah, blah. And my question was...
would these have been the same? Would these people have also been perfectly fine going to a medical doctor?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, there
I
are
know that
fringe groups. There's always fringe groups.
But in general, they would have been like, of course.
Yeah, you break your arm, you go to the doctor, you get it set. That's just what you do. But so that was my question, like, why we didn't have that stigma with the medical field as it touched our physicality. Why, when it touched our mentality, was all of a sudden that
So
forbidden?
what did you find?
So in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, we had some radical shifting taking place. There was the rise of the Industrial Revolution. We had the rise of a new phenomenon in the realm of literary and arts and maybe even architecture of modernism. And we had the rise of rationalism. So modernism was basically a rejection of traditional values as people had known it at that time. Like, I don't want to just do whatever is traditionally accepted as the thing that you have to do, or paint or write or build or anything like that. We're going to explore and then rational. And so it was rejecting traditional norms, modernism, a big influence at the time. Rationalism was the rise of the thinking person, of looking at making decisions and developing beliefs based on what can be proved, what can be proven, what's rational, what is the most logical thing, not based on some religious or mystical, ethereal belief or something that could potentially be emotionally driven. And these things began to we also had concurrently had the rise of mass media. So all of a sudden, philosophical shifts and trends were sweeping the world quickly. It was like fanning the flames of something that all of a sudden was beginning to change people's mindsets. So then all of a sudden, with the rise of rationalism, modernism, Scripture and God, a Christian perspective or Scripture as being the final authority began to be marginalized, which was a radical shift for the Western world since prior to the Middle Ages. The Western world was founded on the idea that Scriptures are the final authority, and of course, what people did with that was horrible anyway too. But so to push back against that, a new and emerging church movement called the evangelicals. They were new on the scene. They had branched away from fundamentalism because the fundamentalists, they're pretty strict. But we're evangelicals. We were going to reach the world. But, this whole problem of modernism and rationalism, we got to nip that in the bud, because we still believe in sola scriptura. We still believe that the Scripture is the final authority. So to push back against it, we all of a sudden get a whole rise of new things on the scene that hadn't been part of Christianity for its existence up until this time. I mark that period of time as one of the greatest shifts within the church. Gave us things like we talked about before, plenary verbal inspiration, trying to attack modernist arguments by using modernist methodology and missing the point. It's like, it's like I'm going to, use this recipe for chicken soup to prove the existence of Bigfoot. I mean, it's that kind of a non sequitur. It's that kind of craziness. But because there were two influential minds at the time that were rising on the scene. You know who I'm going to say, right? Not Jung so much. I would argue that Carl Jung was actually, I would argue that he was closer to being sympathetic to evangelicals in a lot of ways. He was
100%.
He was from a Christian family and everything. Carl Jung was on a different plane.
So Freud.
Freud, and what, do you know the other one?
Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud?
Yes. But
so
Sigmund Freud was the
Oh, was it Karl Marx?
No.
Oh.
It's Dr. Phil.
Darwin?
Dr. Phil.
There it is. Darwin.
Darwin.
So these are two heavily
Right.
influential characters who, again, because of the rise of mass media, whose ideologies are spreading like wildfire. The church is feeling the threat of it, and the demarcation begins there, where the evangelical church views the rise of rationalism and its spokespeople, Freud and Darwin, as being the enemy, and anything associated with them is the enemy. And the battle lines were drawn at that point. And so from that point forward, instead of trying to find a way from both sides, listen, it was both sides. I'm not going to say
100%.
it wasn't like as if the scientists were all over on this side going, I wish they'd understand. They were absolutely, completely dismissive. Instead of both sides looking at the potential merits that each side had to offer, the battle lines were drawn, the walls were built. And so within the realm of evangelicalism, from the turn of the century, I would say up until about a decade ago, it was science and the ilk, and their ilk is over there because they're anti-God. Because Freud said, Freud was absolutely anti-religious. He believed that Christianity and the dogmas that are associated with that were at the base of most people's neurosis. He might have had a point. But instead of trying to work through in any kind of collaborative fashion, it all just became a war. So we, as people who grew up in the 80s and 90s, were the recipients or the inheritors of that war. And that is why for the most part, within the evangelical church, there was a mindset that said, well, if you go to that, you're going to the anti-God solutions. You just need to seek God and give it to God.
That's a great encapsulation. I've never thought about it that way. And what's interesting is Freud. It's Sigmund. Friend Sigmund.
Your buddy.
Freud.
Freud.
What's interesting is that Freud now, even in mental health fields, is not looked at as like, wow, he figured it all out right away, and now we all do what he says.
Right.
He's looked at as, oh, he got the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And what he did was important, and it definitely got us thinking about consciousness and mental, abilities and subconscious and all this stuff. But if you actually read his books as if they are proof in text, you're actually ignoring about 100 or a little over 100 years of research that has actually proved a lot of his ultimate points not wrong, but just really rudimentary.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting is that the mental health field has come past that and has actually recognized the benefits of religion and spirituality to mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So the science community has caught up with the fact that Freud's word isn't, concrete, but the church is still stuck on.
I would say was.
Yeah.
I'm still going to say was, because
Okay.
I really believe there have been monumental shifts. Now, there are going to be people who disagree with my assessment on that. Well, the true Christians haven't given up.
It's
the fight.
generational, right? Like I think that the generation, it's a generational shift. So, and that generation that grew up in the 80s and 90s still is here. And so that mindset is still there, even if, using Freud, there might be an unconscious sort of bias against mental health.
Yes.
That is not intentional, but it was built into
Yes,
our
it's not
upbringing.
well thought out or anything
Right.
like that, but it's an immediate reaction.
Yes.
Because of what
there was a lady. Actually, this is interesting. So there's a lady that I am aware of who is dealing with racism, like deep ender, and it's about it's racism against Mexican people specifically. The reason I'm bringing this up is she is seeking counseling to try to but to try to address the racism. That feels interesting to me because it is an unconscious thing. She's recognizing I have these unconscious biases towards this group of people. I want it to stop. And so this feels similar, that there is, I think, and that's what I'm talking about, is
An
even
unconscious bias.
though consciously I would argue the Christian community has turned towards mental health is important, you need to move this, there is still an unconscious underpinning that's not going to go away, I don't think, until the generations who grew up, which is probably everybody in this room has part of that unconscious bias, is when those die out, then that will go away. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
It absolutely does.
So can I bring God into this?
There's always somebody getting religious on this.
So from your story, one of the things where I believe that God has helped me through is she is seeking mental help through counselors to achieve a goal, what I would say a righteous goal. And where I think for me that helped out is that you can pray and trust God to use these tools to get you to a good spot. And so where there may be barriers or apprehensions to grow deeper in understanding where God wants these things to be at, God can help us out with those things where maybe on our own we couldn't really get to those things, to break those unconscious cycles that you're
And
just
it
speaking
goes
of.
back again to what we were talking about with physical medical science. Like, we believe God is the source of healing, but we're going to trust also that he's working through the hands of physicians that are setting bones or treating cancers or whatever. And what I would argue is that the Bible does point towards issues of mental health and things like that. That the Bible is filled with encouragements in that direction, which doesn't mean that because it's talking about because the Bible encourages us to seek God's help when it comes to our mentality or our thinking, that doesn't preclude the idea of having assistance with that any more than because the Bible wants us to be healthy physically, it would preclude the idea of being able to go to a doctor.
I was thinking about how most non-psychosis based diagnoses in mental health are anchored in some form of anxiety or worry. And how often does the Bible bring up worry?
Yeah.
Constantly.
I love that you said that, Matt, because I think thinking. I had a person come to one of my classes, and she laughed and she said, I really never thought about what I think about. And I think we have a lot of subconscious and unconscious beliefs and patterns from our family that we bring into Christianity with us, right? Even when we're reading the Bible, when we're hearing our sermon, it's filtered through our lived experiences, whether we're conscious of them or not.
Right.
And one of the things that I've noticed talking to a lot of women over the last couple of years is the trying to solve all our problems by thinking and not having the right thoughts. And so when we are trying to alleviate pain, when we're trying to move through something, a lot of times we're having to battle these subconscious beliefs and patterns that we brought in that we're not aware of. And so one of the things that I think mental health counseling, any kind of mental health objective is to help you get clarity around what you're actually thinking and what those patterns and beliefs are that you're not aware of.
That's so good.
That's really good.
So, and I would like your response to this, Luana. So, for me, whenever I was going through some serious mental struggles, even though I didn't necessarily like grow up in the church, but I did live Southern Louisiana. Everybody, like there's an amalgamation of tradition in that, thinking it's cultural.
Cultural, right.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
not even, anyway. But whenever I was going through the mental struggles that I was going through, and I'd been a Christian for probably 15 years, I remember how guilty I felt not having the ability to get over it myself or to trust God. There was an enormous amount of guilt and shame that was involved with it. And I got born again here at Eastgate, so that's not taught here, which is amazing. This came all from my childhood understanding of who God is and that kind of thing. So
interesting.
How I know that God ended up.
Of course, I would take
delivering
you
me.
aside every once in a while and tell you got to get your head together. I
I'm just
understand
really
you.
disappointed in you as a person.
Seems to be working okay.
So that fixed me.
No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to make light. You're actually you're sharing things, and
it's
that's
good.
That's good stuff.
The dark sense of humor that I get is from my mental trauma. So no, this is how I deal with things. My therapist, it was funny the first time I went in there, I kept on doing it. He goes, these are really funny jokes. Can we talk about what's really going on? And I'm like, oh man,
It's not working. Yeah.
But from your experience and from what your understanding about these things are, as a Christian who maybe does have some of these unconscious things, as a listener that's listening to this now, are there tools to kind of get over that guilt or the shame of Christianity, or thinking like you're not a good enough Christian to? Why are you even having these mental struggles?
No.
No. Okay, moving on.
Go see
Listen
Rob
to
and he'll
Matt.
tell you how bad you are.
Matt's in school right now learning that there's no answers to any of this.
There's no, any answers I do get tend to be wrong. So.
A tool, I'll let Matt answer about tools, but I will say one of the things that I found is that you need to know the character of God. What happens in our mental health, I think, from my point of view, is when we have a distorted view of who God is, we bring in our dad into our thing with God. We bring in our disappointments, our thing, and we see him as a man, as a regular person. Mm-hmm. And so we don't know God's character, and that really impacts the way we deal with our mental health and the way we carry shame and guilt, because we think it's our responsibility to change how we see things or to change how we feel. And it's God's gift to us if we align with his heart. But we have to know who God is what I would say. And that's something
Thank you. That's awesome.
And it goes back to what you were saying, Luana, about our unconscious bias and what we're bringing into it. And that's what we're placing on God so often.
Yeah.
Is we're seeing him through the view of what we were
Right. Of our own
not
trauma.
not just our parents, but what people told us God was like.
Yeah.
God is like this. And then we start to believe it. And even if we push back, and that's where I keep going back to that, but like what we say, like I think we have two different belief systems. We have our head belief system, we have our body belief system. Your head may be like all day, yeah, I know God loves me, and I know he's gracious, and I know he's kind, and
Yeah.
I know he wants the best for me. But then in your body, you don't actually live that.
No.
And that's where, yeah. So tools.
It's called
Yeah.
practical agnosticism. So
Yes, yes.
in our intellect, we'll say, yeah, I believe all these things, but in our practice, we can't because we really don't believe all these things.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
The core of who we are.
Tools. I mean, I don't want to make it clinical because I think so much of what we know about mental health in my field specifically is therapy. It's not psychology or psychiatry or life coaching. So this is what I know. What we know about the benefits of what benefits people who are having mental health struggles is actually connection with other people. That's such a big part of mental health. And so the reason therapy works is because you are paying somebody to sort of set aside their own, as best they can, to set aside their own biases, to be a full human in front of you and say, what do you got? Let's talk about this thing. Let's work this out. So, having said that, there are tools, but I always want to encourage people, do not go into a corner and think, let me do these tools and it's going to work. Bring these tools out into either, I mean, it can be therapy. I think, obviously, I'm biased, but I think therapy is incredibly helpful. But it can just be if you've got trusted friends, loved ones. Things like, I think Luana mentioned it before, but like questioning thoughts. So as soon as a thought comes into your head, a belief, be open to questioning it, as deep as it may be. Literally and again, when I say question it, I don't mean be skeptical of everything. I mean say, where's this belief from? What is the validity of it? Where did I get this belief from? And you may do all that and realize that it's 100% a belief you have. But oftentimes I think we suddenly realize, oh, this came from a person I don't trust, or this came from a source I don't even believe in.
Right.
Or whatever. So
You want to be curious.
Curious. And that makes sense then. Okay, so if you were to say like shame as an example of that, if you were to look at that belief and say, where did it come from? You're like, oh, that's not coming from a biblical perspective, even though I'm acting as if it's from a biblical perspective. I'm approaching it as a Christian, but this is not what's represented as God's character in the Bible.
Well, and I was just thinking about how easy it is. That's such a good example because I think especially in a community like this where we feel like, I would argue the air, by air, I mean AIR, the air of the room, the vibe, I guess is the modern term. The vibe, the atmosphere of
It was a 60s
Eastgate.
term, actually. Go ahead.
Well, we're stealing it. Us Gen Zers are stealing it. Excuse me, Gen Alpha.
Going retro.
I'm not Gen Z, to be very clear. But the atmosphere here is one of like giving grace to people and offering it to each other. But I think it's much easier to offer it to others than to ourselves. And so
Yes.
that's where
100%.
things like shame come into play, because we can say like, God is not a God of shame. Like I'm talking to Janelle. I was like telling God is not a God of shame. He doesn't want you to feel shame. But then I walk away and all I feel is shame from other things. Like maybe, oh, did I even say the right thing? Maybe I was too Christian. Whatever.
It was too Christian.
I went too far.
Sorry, whatever. Too evangelical? Is that the right word?
I was reading something the other day. It said we are the only creatures who pay from a mistake more than once or multiple times.
Yeah.
That's
right.
That's a good contemplation right there.
I brought up to that's so good. I brought up to a client yesterday, actually, a quote from Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And I quote this all the time. Janelle might know what it is. But it's one of my favorite quotes, and it's about worry and anxiety. And I'm not even sure it's, directly from the movie, but they say it in the movie. They say, I find with worrying you suffer twice. And that's something that I feel like is most of what I spend my time on. And that's handling the before. Obviously, also, we're spending time afterwards. I always talk about anxiety is about the future, depression is about the past. That's oversimplification. But those are the two biggest things that people deal with usually in mental health. And it's because we're depressed about what happened in the past, what happened to us, trauma, all that stuff. And anxiety is about like, but what's going to happen? And so there's this, if we, as Christians, what I as a therapist, I love giving these people these tools and connecting with them and showing them that I care, that someone cares, whatever. But it's, as Christians, as a Christian, I always wish that I had a stronger opportunity to be like, where you're at, if Jesus is not part of it, there is a hopelessness in it. You're going to come back to this. And I don't want you to. And if you keep coming back, and so maybe that's too much disclosure, but that's something that I've thought about recently is I love helping these people. I love talking to them and helping them kind of question their thoughts and, reframe their cognition and all this stuff. But ultimately, I'm like, you're going to still deal with this. And there's a hope
I love that.
I wish I could offer you in my practice that I just can't.
I love that because I'm conflicted about how much of Jesus do I impart in coaching with people, but I have done like over 5 years I'm trauma informed. I did a 12-month certification for that. I've looked at identity. I looked through all the tools of breath work, grounding, your feet on the ground, like all these things, and they are lovely. Like they have really giving some peace in between. Like they put space in between all the work, but over the last year, it's just been Jesus. Like, I don't know how to say it any plainer, but all those things are works. They do work, but the rest and not having all those intrusive thoughts and not trying to figure out everything. I had heard that anxiety is your imagination as a superpower because it's just imaginations. And the Bible says, cast out all vain imaginations. Anxiety is just you creating stories around the potential thing that could happen, that hasn't happened, and 90% of the time doesn't happen. But you've spent your present worrying about a future that you can't control anyway. So all that to say is like I think I love that we have so many different ways to help us with our mental health, to address our mental health. But I don't know how deep and how far it gets if it's not anchored in your relationship with Christ.
There's a person in our community who is I'm keeping them anonymous. I don't know if I need to. There's a person in our community who has a doctorate in mental health and social work. And I was talking to her about this exact thing, like sort of like, how do I bring Jesus into the room when ethically I can't?
Right.
And so obviously if the client is open to it, that's a different thing, and I dive in. But something that I kind of got from her, and what I just through the conversation, was a trust that Jesus shows up.
Amen.
That I don't have to say his name. And I'm praying for these people. I'm obviously can only see this through the lens of Jesus because because I'm so perfect and I can't.
You're a very holy individual.
Right. But you know what I mean? Like I am so entrenched in that and have been my whole life that it's kind of impossible not to. And I felt like God was like, you just trust me. It's okay.
I love that.
Just be here. And so offer the things that Jesus offers, the fruits of those spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. And trust that he meets through that. That God is not a linear God. Like you meet Jesus and then you get the fruits of the Spirit, or you get he is a living, moving system, and you just offer parts of the system to people and trust that Jesus becomes part of it.
I love
Does that make sense?
That works for me so much.
Truth is truth. There's only one truth, especially from what we consider as Christianity. There is only one truth, and so whenever you give truth, you can't help but to give Jesus. And I do find it fascinating. Listen to you two talk about all of these things. Whenever you were speaking about, yes, somebody is paying you for your time so that you can be a human with them. And whenever you're talking about anxiety and living in the future instead of in the now, and how many, I just had Bible verses running through my head about how God has the whole point of Christianity is to create community, confess your sins one to another, to fear not, to
most repeated command in the Bible.
What's that?
Fear not.
Fear not.
Don't fear.
And Also, the kingdom of heaven is here and now.
Right.
And
That present
don't worry
essence.
about tomorrow, because tomorrow is going to
right.
worry about
Yeah.
its own things.
That's
and
right.
to worry about today. But what you were talking about with now, if you have now, I mean, I talked to, what do you call it, spiritualists, I guess, people who believe in the spiritual but not necessarily in Jesus. The now they're focusing on, but it's absent Christ. And so there's a fulfillment whenever you take now and you're present in Christ. There's something really special about that.
Well, I mean, on a theological level, God is defined as the ever-present now. So it's not a past, present, future thing. It's the ever-present now, which is why Jesus calls us into the now. Take no thought for tomorrow. Today's stupid enough. That's Woodrum translation. But the idea is this is where we find Jesus in the book The Shack, which people have problems with. I think it's fine, but there's a point in there in which the Jesus character is speaking to the main protagonist in the story, and the Jesus character is saying, "You worry so much about the future, but in your imaginations of the future, I'm never there." And that's one of those crazy things that we don't ever imagine him.
No.
They're present, holding us, loving us. It's all just, oh my gosh.
It's
gonna
just me
get
by
hit a
myself
car.
trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Matt, I know too. You talked about.
I love that. Right?
Like in your, I remember you talking to me when you were doing your studies for grad school, how it talked about having that religious connection being a helpful thing for people, and I was like, wait, your science books are saying
Your science books?
Not the science.
I mean, that's what's fascinating, and I don't know, Luana, I'm sure you've seen this too, but like that the research that we've done in the last, couple decades is that we have seen the benefit of spirituality on a person's life. Now, it is blanket spirituality, it's blanket religion. So I'm not, it's not saying Christianity specifically. However,
No, but
the thing is that also isn't their goal. Like, they're not trying to do that. Although I'm sure there are papers.
But I would
do
argue that any kind of theism is going to get you on the path. That
Right.
if we exclude a theistic worldview, what hope are we going to have?
Right.
But if you can at least begin there, C.S. Lewis, that was his whole thing. Well, anyway, go ahead.
No,
I like. Yeah.
I was just thinking about like the being present that Blake was talking about, and Rob, like how interesting I feel like, I'm coming into mental health, 150 years after it sort of became a field.
Yeah.
And how so much of what they have learned is helpful is found in the Bible, in the stories of the Bible about being present. And I mean, literally there are entire exercises about, like Luana said, about grounding yourself, taking deep breaths, looking around. Like I do this thing with our kids. I do this with clients too, but our kids love it. It's called 333. And it's basically where after doing like a quick box breathing exercise, you open your eyes quietly and you name things. The first thing is you name 3 things you can see. And you just name them in your head. You say the word in your head. You don't just look. Like I would look and say surfboard, chair, table. And then
Even
Janelle made a joke,
Janelle
but nobody heard it.
Yeah, she doesn't have a microphone right now, so she's cutting up, but we're missing out on it.
hi.
I was going to let you say heathen. And then and then you do 3 things you can hear. And you sit there and you name the 3 things you can hear. It can be your thoughts in your head. It can be the air conditioning. It could be your feet shuffling. And then you do 3 things that you can move with your hand. It could be your body. It could be just the hem of your pants. It could be, a table next to you, whatever. And what that does is it places you back in the moment. It reminds you that you're here. You're not in the future. You're not in the past. You're right here. And with Jesus, we get to say, and God's here also. He's right here. He will be with you in the past. He was with you he will be with you in the future. He was with you in the past, but he's with you right now. And do you trust him? And if you do, then why are we spending time on
Projecting.
Projecting. Yes.
So because Philippians says, whatever things are true, think on these things. And the future is not true yet
That's true.
because it hasn't occurred.
Right on.
It doesn't exist. That's right.
Sorry.
For both of you guys, my friend Matt told me about this guy named Sam McCabe who I've only brought this up like 3,000 times, but I've listened to the album.
Not on the podcast. So it's brand new as far as...
Maybe, but I've listened to it, 3,000 times. There is a lyric in there, and it says, "How can I trust God with where I'm going if I don't trust God with where I am?" And that means, 3 weeks ago, I didn't trust that today doing a podcast that God would be with me. And so, but if I can choose to say, like what you were talking about with the future, that God's not there in that future. If I can trust God with where I am, I can trust God with where I'm going to be, which is amazing. And then I don't know if you did it intentionally, but whenever I was going through my time, you kept quoting Philippians 4:13 to me. Whatever things are good, whatever things are noble, whatever things are holy, think on these things. You said within a 6-month period, you probably said it 20 times, whether you're conscious or not. And
I'm usually unconscious, so
Well, and there's another example of the Bible saying something that it took 150 years for science to be like, oh, we figured out what is really helpful is that human brains naturally go to the negative, and it's a survival mechanism because we are looking at what's dangerous, what's going to be a problem. Let me focus on this because I need to survive. Yeah. And God in the Bible is telling you, maybe think on some positive things. And what mental health has realized is like, we have to encourage our own brains to think about positive things. We have to tell them, hey, okay, I know that this bad thing happened and bad things could happen, and those are legitimate and valid, and you should feel however you feel about them. But let's be realistic and realize you also are in a comfortable space right now. Maybe you have people in your life who care about you. Or maybe you have a job that's whatever. Like, there are things in your life that are positive happening that your brain.
Funny how you falter over job. I was like, maybe a job.
But you get the idea. Like, there's always something positive, but our minds don't focus on those because they don't have to.
Right.
They can set those. Oh, that's good. Set it aside, and it's a reminder, biblically a reminder.
I just like to imagine like how Jesus felt when all these people, all these teams are doing all this research for 100 years. I'm like, you know what? We should think about positive things. And Jesus
we should
is
take
like,
no thought for tomorrow.
like,
yeah.
You're so smart.
Look at my children.
I wish I had thought of that.
We're clawing our way up to a plateau and finding Jesus sitting there the whole time.
There's stairs. I literally built them for you. But okay, good job.
The beauty is, this is hilarious. This is really funny. But what's great is that that's not how Jesus reacts. We get there and he goes, "I'm so glad you're here."
Yeah.
True. And
that's
and as a mental health thing, that's me just a reminder that shame is not part of it. Janelle's desperately.
I like my Jesus better. Luana, I was curious, Luana, about like what led you to this, like this journey of mental health. Like, was this something growing up? You're like, oh, I'm going to do this.
Yes, I was like, Luana.
But I'm curious to hear your story with it.
God has called you to something so great. I was thinking when Rob was talking about how the evolution of the way we thought about religion being the final word, and then rationalizing. I guess kept thinking, Dr. Phil, like when Oprah and Dr. Phil, like when I was growing up, mental health was summed up in a couple of ways. You don't talk about things outside the family. You don't tell that any parts of secrets. No, you got secrets, and you just pull up your big girl panties. You just suck it up. You just keep going. You don't address things. It's happened. It's in the past. What's the point? And so when I got to be in my 20s, I had to recognize that I had been through a lot of trauma in my childhood. But you didn't call it trauma. I never ever heard of trauma then.
Right.
And when I first heard of trauma, it was about soldiers coming back from war or, policemen or something.
PTSD.
Yes, PTSD. It wasn't about growing up and being molested and stuff like that. People didn't talk about it. So one of the things that I recognize over the last couple of years of learning about your central nervous system and how our brain does deal with trauma and uncertainty, I became a person who just wanted certainty. And I didn't think, oh, it's in God. I was like, I need to be able to control every aspect of life, and I can guarantee these outcomes. If I can get it all right, if I can do the right thing, then I can have a certain outcome. And then my life imploded with a divorce. And one of the things that I've learned is we don't like change. And
100%.
we don't like it, and we don't do it voluntarily most of the time. Most of the time when change happens in your life, it is happening to you, and you have to figure out how you're going to adapt or react to it.
So true.
You don't initiate it because our body, we seek comfort. We seek certainty.
Totally.
So that get the sin of certainty. I love that book.
Yeah. Peter Ennis.
So when I was getting a divorce, I was so shut off and closed off from my own emotions. When I was in therapy and she would ask me, like, what do you think of that? Or what do you feel about that? I would say, I don't know. I had to come. Can I come back next week? Because I don't know what I think about things on my own, and I don't know where I feel any. Oh, where do you feel that in your body? I didn't know what they were talking about. I mean,
right.
What are you talking about?
Stupid question.
Like, people feel their bodies.
I try to ignore most of what happens below my chin.
If it's not in the sensation of bacon tasting, I don't know. You know, like it's just like, yeah. I'm like, I don't get this. I don't understand the words coming out of your mouth, lady. So it just created. And I had 4 kids that I was emotionally distant from. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm with them all the time, and I'm not present in my own life. I'm distracting myself on Facebook, or I'm reading, or I'm on the movies, and I'm escaping my own life. And when the divorce happened, it forced all that stuff up to the surface. You can't ignore it. I guess you could, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. And so I was like, how do I become a better parent? First of all, how do I stay connected to my kids? Because I was so scared of being hurt that I was afraid that I was going to disconnect from them because I couldn't handle their needs, or if something they did and I was just so afraid of everything. I was afraid of feelings. I was like, feelings? Like, I like Tina Turner's song, What's Love Got to Do with It? That was like my theme song. I was like, this is a hit. So that's where it started. It was like, I don't know who I am. I'm divorced. I'm not an Air Force wife. These kids are going to graduate. I won't be a homeschool mom. And I have no idea of who I am, which I felt was so cheesy and so like in all the movies in the 80s. It was like, I don't know who I am anymore. And I thought that was stupid, but I didn't know anything about myself. And I was 47, and I was like, okay, it is time. And so it's just been a journey over the last 10 years. I guess I'll be divorced 10 years next year. It's just been a journey of learning how to stop being so judgmental and shaming myself for everything. And somebody said, you know, what if you saw that there were possibilities in your life that you hadn't considered because you were trying to control everything? And that was just a doorway of opening up to like a self-discovery journey. And that is how I got involved in this. I needed to figure out that you should feel your body. God created you as a whole system. And if you're not able to feel your body, you're missing out a lot of information. And I also learned that when you're trying to protect yourself from pain, you have to not be able to feel joy and love, because they're the flip side of the same coin. So one of my coaches was like, if you're trying to keep yourself from being disappointed, then you can't feel joy. And that was eye-opening to me, because I just was in protect. But you talked about this Sunday, you turn off the valve. Right. That valve is totally on both sides. You can't have one without the other. And that was hard to accept. I'm like, what? I thought when I became a Christian, Jesus was a perfect crown, and I could get, everything was going to happen, and everything was going to work out, and I didn't have to do anything. And so, but I was going to be, but as I've been going through this experience, I've been talking to a lot of different women who are going through their own changes and transitions, and it's a similar story. You get in midlife, your life change. As a woman, you have a lot of identity shifts. You marry someone, you become another name. You have a kid, you become a mom. You have a lot of roles. And when your only identity is in things that can be taken from that end, you're a stay-at-home mom, that's going to end. The kids are going to grow up. They don't stay kids. And I hadn't faced that at all until about, I saw a Facebook post that said, what is your life going to look like in 5 years? And I was like, I don't know. I have no idea. And So it's just been a journey of self-discovery. That's how it started with me. And I wanted to be a whole person. I never knew what that meant, but that's the word I would use. I was like, I'm not a whole person. I could tell I'm compartmentalized. I'm closed off here. I don't allow myself to feel things here. I don't like vulnerability. Like, who?
Oh, I love it.
Why would anyone sign up for that? Like, what do you mean? I got to tell you how I'm what? So it's just been a journey of healing.
That's awesome.
It's interesting that you're talking about whole person. Saved in the Bible, sozo. Doesn't that mean a wholeness, or it doesn't that part of the salvation word? Am I incorrect about that?
Yeah. It's sozo. It's possible you're thinking in terms of shalom, which is
peace.
Speaking towards not just peace, but the completion and wholeness of an entire person. But sozo has to do with restoration, and that can include that. But speaking directly to the idea of wholeness is the word shalom.
Okay. So, you talking about not being able to feel the joy and stuff so going through therapy, that was the most difficult part for me, is because as I didn't realize, so the human brain is pretty powerful in the sense of I could not remember my childhood. I would talk to other people and they're like, oh, don't you remember? And I'm like, not at all. My wife would talk about things like whenever she was a kid. And at one point I was like, I almost feel kind of a sense of jealousy, like, oh man, you remember all these fun things. My brain had cut off memories, like entire blocks of childhood memories. And so going through therapy, I did learn about emotions, and it was I identify so much of what you're saying. The therapist would be like,
did she bring out a feelings wheel?
No, I didn't
Matt
get one
does
of
that.
I got a feelings wheel.
Matt does that as
I had no idea.
Emotions
terrifying.
Yeah, so the emotions wheel is just it's a wheel. It's a circle of emotions, and in the center are sort of like what people normally say, like, how are you doing? And there's like 6 or whatever. I mean, they're all different, but there's like 6. It's like happy, sad, scared, disappointed, not even disappointed, angry, yeah. And then outside, and so what the wheel does is it sort of forces you to think harder. Okay, well, give me more. And so you go out, and on the out, so you follow. Like if you say happy, you follow that wedge out. Okay, which of these best fits? And then you follow out again. And it sort of makes, and once we name something like that, it actually releases it of its power over your immediate moment and gives you some sense of like, oh, I didn't realize this is how I felt. I feel like, and I don't know if you're similar in this, Luana, is so much of what I'm doing in counseling is just convincing. Most of the time I'll ask a question like, I don't know. I don't know. And I mean, teenagers are the worst, but it's everybody. Like every single person. Like when you're trying to get them to just talk about this stuff. And that's where something like Emotion Wheel is nice, because it kind of makes them be like, well, I guess I felt like ashamed. And they're like, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way. Anyways. Just getting people to talk about emotions. There's a great deal of
power in naming things, which is a bibiblical concept as well.
Right.
Because everything begins, the order is set by naming. And
no, that's really good. I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just that I was so disconnected. She had to bring out a feelings wheel. And like Matt said, so anger could be disappointment, or it could be fear of rejection. It wasn't just that you're mad. And I didn't know that. I didn't know.
I remember the feelings wheel now. Whenever that was said, I'm a very literal thinker, and I was thinking like Wheel of Fortune, where you spin it.
You're like,
and
Vanna.
You're like, okay, it landed on joy. Now explore what joy means. But recognize. So one of the harder things about therapy, I recommend it. It's not easy, but one of the harder things is when you start to get into these emotions, and it starts to open up memory. I started having dreams of my childhood, both good and bad. And whenever you open up the gate, that's when everything flows through, and it is terrifying. And whenever you don't have anybody to go through that with, thank God I had a supportive wife that I could talk to about these things through this time until the next.
Everybody knows it wasn't going to be us.
You could be like, can we talk to you? And we just close the door.
Very slowly, though. Just
Here's Blake. Here's Blake.
Rob just kept on saying, go memorize a Bible verse.
God.
But there is a terrifying aspect of opening up yourself to joy and to possibilities and these things, because it's not just the one emotion that you're opening up to. Whenever the door is open, it's all of them. And it's a difficult thing to go through. If you can go through it and trust that Jesus is going to be there with you, it makes a huge difference. And so I have heard of people going to therapy who are not Christians. I don't know how they make it through it without Christianity. I had to lean on Jesus so much.
Well, and I think that we also, that's where like the difficulty of sort of recognizing and opening ourselves up to these emotional experiences. The difficulty is that we have so tied emotion and thought and behavior together, and they're different. And so like, I'll even have people where I'm like, let's talk about the emotion, name the emotion. And they're like, well, I'm just worried that he's going to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, I heard worry, that's an emotion. And I said, but you also tied some thoughts to that. Can we talk about like those thoughts for a minute? But then I want to separate them. I would just want to talk about the worry. Let's just focus on that for a second. And then that they start to realize, well, I guess I do feel the worry, but it's not as scary when I separate it from the thoughts. And then we are able to just feel an emotion. Separate the thoughts for a little bit.
Luana did a thumbs down, and I identified with her so much.
Luana, you take the opposite approach in your coaching.
Go with the thinking.
And you were telling us before the podcast started how you were working to like kind of retrain your thoughts as you, in terms of like fear and just things like that. What?
Yeah, I was an overthinker, so I what is that, paralysis analysis? I had that, and I always was trying to think that I had to get the right answer. I didn't have a lot of grace in my life for me, and I noticed that you can have all for somebody else, but for you have this standard that you can't ever meet, that you're gonna have to be perfect. And so I had to start. I had to, like Matt was saying earlier, I had to get curious about the thoughts. Like, how is this helpful? How is this thought helpful? Even if it's true, is it helpful? Where did this thought come from? I mean, is this something my second grade teacher told me? I'm still wrestling with my kindergarten teacher saying she talks too much. That still plays in my life sometimes when I'm in a group and I'm like, well, sometimes I talk too much. And that's from a thing when I was 5 that is still like a little tape in my brain. So I think one of the things with the trauma of my childhood was it was like a recording, and I just rehearsed it over. I massaged it. I cultivated these thoughts and these feelings and these beliefs. And you had to come to a point where you're realizing like, you know what, I don't have to carry these around anymore. How do I put them down? And that was like capturing your thoughts, or at least questioning them. And then if it's coming against like Jesus loves you, that Jesus has all the time for you, that Jesus is going to provide for you. If it's coming against any of those things that is promised in the Bible, then maybe this is a thought that I need to shoo. So I named my brain Linda. I did, and I saw this thing that people were like, Linda, but I hadn't seen it, but I named her Linda, and I was like, Linda, we're not thinking that way today. I just tell Linda, listen, Linda, yes, listen, Linda.
No, that's good. That's the othering the problem sort of thing. Like the problem isn't you.
Yeah.
The problem is the problem, and yeah. Go ahead,
we could even take it a step further, in which I don't want to derail what we're talking about here, but I am one who believes there's another force at work as well, even beyond our own thoughts, our own past traumas, all of these things. I believe there's an active force opposed to us and opposed to God's good at work, sometimes with a tape recorder, playing it in our ear. Not necessarily, you had made a statement before the podcast started about where did this thought come from? It's not mine. It's one of those things that I think through all the time. It's not my thought. I don't believe this is God's thought as far as I can tell from what's been revealed. So this is either from my past or there's something else at work whispering to me. But whatever it is that's not God's thought or my thought, I'm rejecting it.
Yeah, I definitely.
Or I'm attempting to reject it, because that's a struggle in and of itself.
And that's where I have to. I know what you're talking about, and I feel like I will in my thoughts, but I get behind me, Satan.
Yeah,
and it's this idea of like I'm not going to go down that path, because there can be this idea, especially with anxiety and those different things that you struggle with. Of I'm just going to keep thinking about this because and take this like path in my mind, because surely at the end there's going to be some answers and there's going to be some clarifications. You realize this is just a maze that's not going anywhere,
That's
and
right.
it's not productive for anyone. And so it's choosing to say, I see that path, I've been on that path, it's not helpful, I'm going to choose to take my brain in a different direction. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yes.
It makes me think of, have you guys read Screw Tape Letters? I'm sure some
Yes.
of you
Oh, yeah,
have.
I love
yeah.
that book.
That I want to read that again now. I read it obviously years ago, but now that I've gone through mental health, because I'm realizing that that's what's so interesting about the insidiousness of the enemy. And again, I don't, none of us really know what that entity is like, but
it's very confusing.
the insidiousness of it is that it's not you're evil, you're bad, go kill people. It's like distraction and
right.
and poking at. So like Rob, you had said, that's not my thought. Maybe it was in my past. Is I think oftentimes it is, and it's him just being like, hey, remember that thing you did?
He's called the accuser of the title given to it. There's no name for this thing, but it's called the accuser of the brethren. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Some force, something at work to disrupt our sense of wholeness that's found in God.
There was before the podcast, when I knew that it was about mental health, there was only one thing that I wanted to, or one story I wanted to tell. Whenever I was going through this, and this gets directly to what you were speaking of, is about the enemy. I had so many lies come into me in my head of that I am more of a disservice to everybody around me, including my wife, kids, church.
I'm sorry, I
staff.
didn't mean to say all that stuff. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. I'm ruining it. I'm sorry.
Just Rob.
It's a Rob's voice.
Every morning,
I just look over and there was Rob.
Random voice come to me through my phone.
you awake?
But it was a constant, relentless it would be better off for the people around you if you weren't here.
Oh yeah.
Because you're causing more damage than you are good.
Yep.
And I started to just replay in my head. So God brought me through this. Now I was going to therapy. I ended up taking medication for a period of time out of necessity. But God provided those things on this earth.
Exactly.
And I took advantage of those things.
That's
but
right.
God ultimately got me through it. And one of the things that he I believe that he spoke to me was one, when I was holding myself up to this perfection, I would give myself zero grace. And that gets so tiresome that you make more mistakes and it just turns into a cycle.
true.
Yes.
And so
true.
I was holding myself up to a perfection, and God eventually showed me that I had made an idol out of myself. I had made myself God and held myself up to a standard that we hold God to, and God does not hold us to. And then the other thing that helped me tremendously was God kind of gave me an example as I was kind of just the thoughts that I would have toward myself and the way I'd speak to myself were horrendous. And God was saying, if somebody at church promised that they were going to do something for you and then they did not do that thing, what would you say to them? I forgive them. I give it wouldn't even be a question. Well, why? Well, I give them grace, God. They're my brother. I have no idea what they're going through. They could be going through something really difficult, or maybe they just forgot, or any number of things. Like, why would I be mad at them for not doing this thing? And God said, why won't you give yourself that same grace? You're willing to give this grace to other people, but not to yourself. It took me months. That was a starting point, but it took me months to start being kind to myself in my head. I was so mean to myself. If I were a quarter of as mean to other people as I was to myself, they would punch me in the face and they would have every right to do so. And I realized that the way that I speak to myself has got to change. I've got to start speaking to myself.
You started punching yourself in the face.
Well, and the beauty of that,
I had to start speaking to myself as a child of God,
Right.
as God,
really good.
the way that God sees me instead of the way that I see myself.
Yes.
and that's maybe where that difficulty comes when it comes to doing mental health work without God, because when you're doing it without God, you are pushing against everything the person knows. Whereas when you're doing it with God, you can say, hey, you actually have proof of the fact that you are worthy and that you don't need to worry, that you are safe. With somebody else, you're saying, the world isn't telling you this, your brain isn't telling you this. I'm going to have to try, we're going to work to rewire this, but you're going to constantly go out into the world and never have anybody else tell you that this is this way.
Getting back to the enemy thing that Rob was
100%.
speaking of, these thoughts that I was having, those were not from me. There was
Right on.
something attacking and wanting to kill me. And
With the fact that we all have these common thoughts,
Right.
that's a weird thing. Like,
Right.
how in the world can all these different people with this diverse backgrounds and disparate experiences end up with these same thoughts? There's
Yeah.
something to that.
Luana, I really appreciate your perspective and even what you talked about with like the different shifts of identity that a woman goes through. I wanted to be like, can we talk more about that? I really liked it. And but I if it's okay to say, Luana has been talking about trying to get a women's podcast going through our Eastgate podcast platform that will be starting in the next few months. So any other women who are listening to that, like, wait, I want to hear more of that. We will be moving forward because I've just been so blessed by what you.
Thank you, Janelle.
The wisdom
Yes.
that you share.
I plan on leading that. I don't. Actually, you know what? You guys don't need to be there. I got it.
I love
All
it.
right. So real quick before we end it, I wanted to bring it back around. So we talked about it, but I would like to, condense it and lay out some helpful things. So to bring our issues to God, what are some practical ways we can just bring it to God?
I mean, so if someone were to say, I was told to bring it to God, how do I do that? Okay, so first I'd say be honest with God about how you're feeling and your concerns and what is going on. And then be open to the different people around you, the different ways around you that God can use to help kind of encourage or understand what's happening and work towards peace with that. And then even with bringing it to God, it would depend on the specific situation, because I would also want to say, let's look up, see what the Bible has talked about with these different things. If people are struggling, I have people say to me sometimes, I'm struggling and I'm trying to do everything right. I don't know why God's so upset with me. And so that's where you can be like, oh, there's actually stories in the Bible that talk about this. Let's look at Job and see what we can learn from those types of things. So I think those are all different ways we can bring it to God by looking at the scriptural references, but it has to start by being honest. And I think sometimes when we bring things to God, we bring it to God in the idea of,
Here's what he expects me to be.
here's who he expects me to be. I'm bringing it to God and saying, God, I know you're telling me everything's fine, but that's not bringing it to God. That's still just saying what you think.
Right. That's
God is
informing
saying.
God about what his expectations
His expectations and who he is.
Yeah.
But it's still not, being vulnerable with God about what it is you're going through. I'm struggling. I feel like I make everything worse. I don't want to get out of bed today. I'm struggling to connect to my children. I'm overwhelmed at work. I let everybody down. I don't know what to do. I'm lost. I mean, just sometimes in Christianity, it can be scary to admit you're lost because it's like, wait, but I'm a Christian.
supposed to be found.
Yeah,
I'm supposed to be
and,
found.
And so that's what I would say.
It is. No, that's excellent. The other thing I would say is don't do it in isolation. That's a lie from the enemy.
Right on.
That you're the only one going through this. Everybody
real.
else is a good Christian. They don't struggle with these things. Thank God. So I chose to go through in isolation. God had brothers and sisters call me and tell me that I wasn't alone, and that they were willing to listen and talk to me and those type of things. So thank God for his miracles in that. But I was going to do it isolated. It's a lie. You're not going through it by yourself, and reach out in community. And then another just small practical thing, it's more dealing with depression. You didn't get the entire kitchen clean. Go and put up the bottom rack of dishes in the dishwasher.
Right.
Something small. It doesn't matter what it is. Count it as a victory. No matter what it is. I wiped the counters down today. That's something.
I was going to say, when you are giving it to God, ask him to reveal the resources he may have already placed in
Perfect.
your life
There it
that
is.
could be helpful. So things like, if you have the means and the ability and the time to do therapy, maybe that's good for you, or life coaching. Maybe that's what you need. Maybe you have friends in your life who will be there for you if you need help. I'm big on once you say give it to God, ask him, reveal to me ways in which you have already provided answers to these questions that I, in my simpleness and my humanity, have forgotten.
Amen.
Bring it to front of mind, and then make a list of your resources. I know that sounds silly, but like literally pull out your phone, make a list. Like, I can do mental health. I have these friends I can call. I have this, whatever, you know what I'm saying.
It's very good.
Let's see. I would say what I've learned over the last couple of years is I wanted God to be like a magic genie. So if I had a problem, I was like, "Are you gonna just do it?" And most of it, and that has not happened. I'm still waiting. But what I've learned is God wants to be in relationship with you, and you don't get to be in relationship with people that you just jingling to. So it's a process. When you bring your thing to God, you're saying, I need you. And he's saying, thank goodness you finally stopped trying to figure all this stuff out by yourself and you're coming to me. I've been waiting for you. It's not like you're bothering him. You're not disturbing him. You're not interrupting him. He has gone before you. So when you're talking about what he's already provided, because God already knows that you're going to have a need and he's promised to provide all your needs. So, but don't be surprised if it's a process, and in that process you get to know and learn more about God and how he sees you.
It's great.
And Rob, I know you've never dealt with anything before, but would you say that...
But I know you mortals go through it. So.
But I know that you've spoken about liturgies and how helpful those are. Would you consider that to be?
Written prayers can be a wonderful way. In fact, honestly, that's where I found a lot of relief. And I was thinking about what you were talking about in terms of I forgot how you worded it. No, about centering yourself and recognizing things.
333.
So I had never heard of that. That's the first time I've actually ever heard this. I had started that practice without realizing that was a thing through the liturgies that from the Celtic Book of Prayers, and so I'd go through a prayer and I would stop and I would pay attention to something around me. There's a bird over there. There's a thing over here, bringing me into that moment. And there's something about being present in the moment that just unlocks this whole flow of communication. That's
where God is.
Right, exactly. And
God's in the moment
now. Yeah, that's
Amen.
right. So yes, it's not going to be for everybody, but for me, it was so monumentally helpful to have a structure. And as I talked about last Sunday, I'm probably undiagnosed ADHD, so my brain's pinging constantly, like just jumping everywhere, and to be able to have something that just kind of captures my thinking,
tangible,
that I'm looking through and working through, somehow settles everything down and enables me to begin the free flow of communication.
I love the written prayers as well, because there's a connection that you have to other Christians in that
That's
moment.
right. Historically, too.
Yeah, that it's not an isolated thing, but I'm joining in with people, voices, especially with the Celtic Book of Prayer. That's something that you found and it's wonderful. But yeah, just joining in with voices that have been speaking these prayers for hundreds of years and joining in that community.
If you, the listener, have any questions or if there's something you want to learn more about, you can send us an email at egcfpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening.
If you're listening to this podcast, know this: you are loved by God,
Amen.
and nothing will ever change that.
Amen.
Right on.